Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to have you here, and I think we're going to have a very, very good meeting. I suppose I just feel a little bit overcome because I just got so emotionally invested in the service that we've just had, and the most beautiful prayer, the blessing to start with, the songs, the prayers that the children came up and the young people came up and said, the music. I just thought it was the most beautiful, beautiful service. So I wanted to thank everybody who was involved in that. I think I'm wiping away tears. And also thinking that because of the subject that we're going to be talking about growing young, this was the perfect segue into, or the perfect beginning for our discussion today. Okay, so the reason that I'm here as chair of the Church Council is that our Church Council wants to share with everybody here in the congregation a journey of learning and reflection that some of us have been on late last year and are hoping to continue this year. Now, you'll know that our planning for quite a number of years has been really to support our young people, their families, and to reach out to the wider community. And you'll remember that we've got a mission statement, which probably may need some revising, but it's really, you'll know it, to be convinced of God's love and led by God's Spirit, reaching out to others. You'll also know that we've had a position description for a family and community worker, and this has been in progress for quite some time. We're still awaiting some further advice from the Synod, hopefully in the near future. But importantly, what we've been doing late last year has been to look at a book called Growing Young. Now, this is a very practical, evidence-based book. It was published in 2016, and it tells in this book what is happening in a wide range of churches that are now really thriving, but the setting is in the United States. So, there's a Fuller Youth Institute. They undertook some really extensive research, and they're located in California. They are very highly regarded. They're part of the Fuller Theological Seminary there. And this is what they do. This is what the Fuller Youth Institute does. We equip diverse leaders and parents so faithful young people can change our world. And in 2013, they started a research project called Churches Engaging Young People. And then they published their findings in this book. And you'll see that I've got lots of notes. This is the book called Growing Young. And this is what I want to talk about on behalf of our Church Council and others. And what the Fuller Youth Institute is asking, and listen carefully, it's asking one of the toughest questions we face. How do leaders, how do parents help foster a really lasting faith in young people that helps them grow into adulthood? And it's a faith that they own. It's not something which they get just from their parents, but something which belongs to them. And what is it that really helps churches to thrive in working and supporting children, young people, teenagers and young adults? And I was thinking, do we actually need Growing Young after the service this morning? But I think we do, because Growing Young will add some richness and some direction to what we are already doing. So, Growing Young is a strategy of 6 commitments that any church can use and in any order, and they're not financial commitments. And as I said earlier, it's based on evidence on a huge range of churches, whole range of denominations, whole range of locations, whole range of sizes. Something like 250 churches were involved in this study over a period of 4 years. And the research has been very, very well received. So in Australia, we haven't done that work. We are relying on the work that's been done in the US. But it is very strongly supported by the Uniting Church of Australia, by our Synod, and within the Synod there's a group called Uniting Mission and Education, UME. And that includes a team called the Pulse team. Now, remember that, the Pulse team, because that's important. And what the Pulse team does is their particular responsibility is to focus on supporting young people and to develop and help them grow their faith. And there's also support for what we are doing here, what we've been reading about last year, from the very top of the Synod of New South Wales and ACT. You remember that we have a wonderful moderator, the Reverend Simon Hansford. He was with us last year. I remember my husband saying, he was so impressed with what he heard Simon Hansford had to say. So he has been reading Growing Young, and so he very strongly supports this. Okay, so basically the purpose of this meeting is to find out more about what Growing Young is all about, what we've been discovering over our sessions of study, and what we want to ask you at the end of the meeting is whether you as our congregation, or whether us as our congregation are prepared or are happy to support us continuing in this direction, looking at these 6 commitments and infusing those into the work that we do. So we want you to understand the opportunities, but also there are always challenges, and we'll just see how you're feeling by the end of the presentation. Last year, a number of our members completed a Fuller Youth Institute survey. Now think back to last year, and we sent that to the Institute in the US, and they gave us an assessment and Robin's going to talk about this a little bit later. So we've already had some connection with the Fuller Institute. Now, in finding out about Growing Young, we undertook to do a study of that book with a member from the Pulse team. His name is Mog. He's, I don't know how old he is, maybe late 30s, early 40s? Mid-30s, sorry, and very, very enthusiastic, and he was great to have us leading that. We had about 8 meetings, and when I say we mean representatives of the Church Council. So that included Margaret and Robin, myself, our minister, Sunjay. We also thought it was really, really important to include young people. So now where's Bella? And Josh came along as well. And also we had Alan and Jenny, because you might remember that when Bella and Josh were preparing for their confirmation, Alan and Jenny were their mentors in that process. So we thought that was a good sized group. And so we went through each of the 6 commitments, plus a bit at the beginning and a bit at the end. So that took us 8 sessions. Each session was at least 2 hours, and we met in the room over there. So that's what we mean by what we were, reading and what we were studying. Okay, just a quick quiz. Growing Young, book or movie? Book, you know that, okay. How many commitments are there in Growing Young? I can't hear. 6. Thank you. Right, okay. What was the institute that did the research for Growing Young? Fuller Youth Institute. Thank you, you got it right. Okay, what's the name of the team in the Uniting Church which really supports Growing Young and young people? Pulse, good. Okay, you're doing extremely well. Okay, last question. True or false? Does Growing Young answer this question? How do leaders and parents help foster a lasting faith in their young people that helps them grow into adulthood? And what what helps churches thrive with teenagers and young people? True or false? True. Oh, good. Okay, rightio. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit more at the end about how we are going in relation, how's Growing Young happening in other Uniting churches. But I'm inviting you to listen fairly carefully and have some questions at the end. We'll leave questions to the end. And we'll explain the key points about Growing Young down the track. It's probably around about slides 11 and 12, but I'll try and go fairly quickly through things, so you'll need to listen carefully. Okay, Growing Young. This is a presentation that basically was prepared by Molk and his colleague Joyce, and we've just added a couple of slides to make it ours at the end. And I want you to remember this, that for young people, this really sort of stayed with me. Molk said, what young people are really interested in is, who am I, like my identity? What's my purpose in life? What am I going to do? There's so many opportunities, but what am I going to do? And where do I belong? Where do I belong? And there's lots of places you can belong. Okay, next slide, please. So that you can see from the slide behind me that it's asking, what does the future of our church look like? What does the future of our church look like? So, what do you think the future of the church looks like? Is it growing? Is it staying the same? Is it decreasing in numbers? Is it a church where you've got to have a really modern building? You've got to have really cool music? Those sorts of things. Does anyone want to make any comments? I'm just asking for one or two quick comments. If you don't want to comment, that's fine. Okay, but have a think about, what is the church of the future going to be like? Next slide is, when we look at the job of leaders in any setting, one of the key things they must do is define reality. You've got to tell the truth. What are things really, really like? Because if you don't understand where we are, how can we move forward? Okay, and this Max Dupree has a strong association with the Fuller Youth Institute. And he says we need to know where we are before we can move forward. And the next 3 slides are going to give us a little bit of a reality check about where we are overall as the church in the world, or particularly in America. So we'll move on to the next slide. Thank you. 1 in 2 drift. Now, we have wonderful young people, beautiful parents, and we've had a most beautiful service. But when you look at the research, and this is research done in the US initially, when young people get older, even though they don't mean to, things happen in their life after school, and they drift. It's shocking. The research that the Fuller Institute has done, 1 in 2 drift. They drift away. Now, those young people, when they were in the church and growing up and in high school, 80% of them thought, I'm going to keep staying with church. But a large number actually do drift. And I was one of those, not initially at uni, but later on. And it's who you meet, decisions you make, a whole range of things. So some young people drift away and then they reconnect later. Others just drift. And Malk said, he's from the Pulse team, he said the benefit of what the Fuller Youth Institute study did is that it prompts us to ask, is that happening here in Australia? And he said, it's actually worse. It's actually worse in Australia because we don't have, and he used this interesting word, we don't have an enculturated church that exists as in the United States. Now, some of you will probably know the meaning of that. I had to look it up just to be sure. But an enculturated church is one where there are a lot of people who share the same sorts of values. And you know that in some places in America, really, really incredibly strong churches. And we also have these really strong churches but the situation is, if we have a look at our own church's National Church Life Study, or I think it's National Church Life Study, and the Australian Bureau of Statistics, both of those indicate that there is this drift. So more and outside of our wonderful church and other great churches, but more and more young people are not connecting with the church. And they're becoming agnostic or they're becoming atheist. Where does a young person, where do we put our attention? Where do we focus our attention? There's so much stuff out there, and we know a lot of people are playing sport, or they're going to coffee shops, or a whole range of things. Or they've got responsibilities, or they have to work. There's a whole lot of very, very good reasons. But we are seeing this drift. But there are a lot of some young people who are really searching for understanding and a sense of spirituality. So thinking back about young people's search for identity, who they are, what they're going to do, Where do they belong? And Malk said it's really important. What he sees Growing Young doing, this book, the 6 strategies, is to connect young people deeply into the love of God, and that the mission of God is to, can transform their lives. I think we're already seeing that happening. I was just blown away by what we've just observed in our service this morning about the confidence and the way that you prayed. That was so moving, and others as well. That'll stay with me forever, I think. But it's a very big challenge to address this drift. Okay, so that's one thing. We need to understand that there really is a significant drift for young people. They don't mean to, but that's often what happens. So we need to do something so that to stop that drift happening. The second thing that the research found out, that there's actually no major Christian tradition in the US is growing today. And they said, Malk said, what's the reality in Australia? How true is it for the Uniting Church here? And if we look at the National Church Life Survey or Study and the Australian Bureau of Statistics, it's something similar. People move from one church to another, but we're still not seeing a lot of growth. But there are young people really fired up with about issues, and we think of Greta Thunberg and others, but there are also so many challenges facing young people. So the church can offer so much. We can offer so much to help young people navigate a very, very interesting life, both here and globally. We'll move on to the next slide, thanks Sunjay, and this is religious nuns are on the rise. Now, it doesn't mean nuns as in a habit. It means those people who don't have any connection with the church and don't want to have any connection. And in America, it's something like between 16 and 23%. When they answer a survey, they say they don't have any religious belief. They're a nun, okay? And Malk said it's at least that number in Australia. So that's a quick snapshot of some of the challenges that are facing the church. But we'll move on to the next slide. This is a really good one. But what if this isn't the whole story? And what if we can take this data, change the story, and really connect into the community and its issues? And Malk made the point on a presentation that he did that we just need to be aware that there are so many issues facing young people, and he mentioned there are, and you would know, a lot of homeless young people. They live on a couch, not just for a couple of days, not just for a couple of weeks, but for months on end. And I suppose what we can see is that what Growing Young can do is help us invest, care, mentor, and just love young people. So we'll move on to slide 8. So we're moving along at a cracking pace, I hope. Okay, slide 8 is that, and I hope you can read that, you should be able to read that, the churches that aren't shrinking and ageing but are growing and keeping young people. And in America, and in the US, when they used this, did this research, they were looking at a group of young people 15 to 29. I think in our church we'd be looking at a wider range than that. We'd start much younger. I think we'd start with people like Sebastian's age. We'll move on to the next slide. Right. When you think about how do you actually support young people, what this research found out is that it doesn't depend on the size. You don't need huge, great churches, although some in the US are huge. It doesn't depend on a particular region or, is it city or country or whatever. It doesn't matter about age. It doesn't matter about denomination. And they said, Malk said this, you don't need the one charismatic minister. You don't need the one charismatic youth leader. What you do need is a whole family of people who want to care for each other, and particularly for young people. And what that means is spend time with young people, get to know young people, Do you know the name of every young person in our church? Do they know the name of every older person in our church? Have we got time to spend with young people and support them? And the point about growing young, and from the Uniting Church's point of view, is that we all of us grow, all of us become more vital when we invest in growing young. So a lot of it's about interest and time and where you put your attention. Okay, we'll move on to slide 10. How are we going for time? So, very importantly, growing young isn't about changing youth ministry. It's about changing the way we do things. Now, I think we're already well on the path, but it's not as though we just need that one minister or that one youth leader. We all need to be in this together, and that's why we're having this meeting. Okay. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that for us, it's not just about putting all the emphasis on young people. It's about how do we build a really intergenerational church. And when you think about it, families, they're all about having loving families of many different generations. So that's what we're building, a really cohesive, loving church family. And we're obviously, I think, very much in that space. Okay, can we move on now to this very important slide, slide 11. Now, I'll just go through those. I'm going to have to... Actually, I've got the slide here in front of me. Okay. Rightio. This is called the Growing Young Wheel, and as you can see in the centre, it's all about a Jesus-centred community. And there are 6 different areas around that, and I want to talk a little bit about each of those. You don't have to go in any particular order. You can start wherever you like, and each one reinforces the other. And you might say, well, how am I ever going to remember what those 6 are? So I'm going to give you a handy hint. There's an old-fashioned man's name in Australia, Lew, L-E-W. So hold on to that. Can you all say that in your mind? L-E-W. The other one is, think about Japan, J-A-P-A-N. What I want you to remember is J, P and N. Put L-E-W and J-P-N together. And I'll just see if I can do this, okay? It's about leadership. You can check and see that I'm right. It's about leadership, it's about empathy, it's about a warm community. It's about Jesus and his message centrally. It's about prioritising young people, and it's about being the best neighbours. Now, if I can remember it, you can. So we'll just go back over it, L-E-W, J-P-N. So that if someone asks you, well, what is this growing young? You can say, I know, L-E-W, J-P-N. Right, okay, and you've got it. Okay. So we'll move on to the next slide. And this is one where there's a bit more explanation. So I'll just go through what's on the slide there and see if I can marry it with what I'd also prepared here. So that one of the things that we look at is the importance of leadership. And that is, how do we empower young people? How do we give them opportunities to grow? So it's about encouraging young people to take on leadership roles. And it can be about joining the church council. You don't have to join the church council. They may want to just observe the church council so they have a better understanding. It's also about participating in groups, camps, like some of you been involved in KCO and Soul Survivor, which are looked after by Pulse. Okay. But there are opportunities outside our church to become leaders. And when you go on to university or to TAFE or other training, there are opportunities to become leaders in a Christian context. And I ended up becoming a leader of a group on a university campus, Student Christian Movement. We were different from the evangelicals. We had people that were very strongly committed to Jesus, and we had others that were asking questions. So it was a very broad group of young people, but that was really good. But there are lots of opportunities to become leaders, and all of our young people can become leaders. So that's important, to provide opportunities for them to grow in that capacity. And I think the important thing is also to help them, and this is not my words, it's somebody else's words, but to authentically own their own faith. So they don't just inherit it, but they actually own it themselves. Okay. The next one is about empathy. And that means, as you would know, to what extent do we actually understand what it's like to be a young person in 2021 or in 2022? What are the challenges that they face? They are so different in many ways from what older people are used to. How do we understand what young people think of the world and what is really meaningful to them? It's also an opportunity just to sit with young people and feel what they are going through. And we'll come back to this a little bit later, or in a few minutes, with some possible ideas about that. The next one is Jesus' message, taking Jesus' message seriously. And the script that we've got up here is about, instead of asserting formulaic gospel claims, welcome young people into a Jesus-centred way of life. Instead of giving the usual answers, we need to listen. What are the questions that young people are asking, and how can we truthfully respond to those questions that they're asking from our own experience and from our faith? And we might like to consider, are there issues that sometimes are taboo that, people don't want to talk about? How do we manage that? And there may be cultural reasons for that. So the bottom line is, how is our faith being reflected and lived? And how is the faith of our young people being reflected and lived? Okay, moving on, warm relationships. And I thought this was quite interesting. Instead of focusing on cool worship and cool programs, what we need to have is warm peer and intergenerational friendships. So that warmth is really, really important. We need to think about, I think we do a lot of it, and having lunch together is one way of doing that, as well as all being together in the service this morning. But how do we actually create that warmth? Now, sometimes we have young people just all sitting together. That's fine. And sometimes we have older people sitting together, but we need to mix it up a bit more. So one of the things about growing young is, how do we mix it up a bit more so that we can become growing young together? The other thing too is about making sure everyone's voices are heard. And we'll return to that in a moment. Okay, moving along. Next one, prioritise everywhere. Instead of just saying, oh yeah, young people matter, what we need to do is really take that to heart and find very creative ways to they use the word here, tangibly, but how do we really practically support, resource and involve young people in all aspects of our church? And I think we are very fortunate. I mean, the work that our Sunday school does, Lenny and Margaret and others, and the services, and Sunjay, bringing this all, making sure that young people have a role and a responsibility in leading us and helping us worship together. Oh, sorry, there was a point I wanted to mention here about prioritising young people. It means prioritising more than you might think, more than we have in the past. It doesn't mean that there's not a role for people like me or older folk. It just means we need to really focus on supporting young people and prioritising them and their families. And being open to hearing what young people would like and taking advantage or, drawing on the talents and strengths of young people. And mentoring is a really good example of that, and I've mentioned about Jenny and Alan. But there are other sorts of mentoring as well, and Robin came up, I like it, with the term reverse mentoring, because when we were planning this meeting, we said, we were thinking about it, and we thought, but young people, you have got so much knowledge, so many skills, you can mentor us. So there could be that reverse mentoring. So it's not just one way, it's a two-way process. And lastly, the sixth thing is being the best neighbours. Helping young people to neighbour well locally and globally. How do you actually think about and support other young people or other communities? And in the prayers that we heard this morning, we heard about Myanmar, we heard about young people who are in dire straits. and other situations. And Sunjay mentioned about Jesus as the peacemaker. How much does our world need peace? How much does our world need justice? So those were some, that being the best neighbours is really, really important. And how do we help young people perhaps take on interests that they already have or also expand their interest? And that way we are all growing. So this is the last slide from me for a while. The next one, number 13. Help young people discover and love your church. So where to from here? Okay, if we decide that we're going to take on these 6 commitments, I'm just going to get you to tell me what they are again. L stands for leadership. E stands for W stands for warmth. J stands for Jesus. P stands for prioritising young people, and N stands for neighbours. Oh, you are doing really well. Great. Okay. All right. So those are the 6 areas that Growing Young focuses on. Okay, so within the church there is this team which is called the Pulse team. Thank you. Okay, and there are 3 officers there, Malk and 2 others. One is called Joyce. And after Easter, they are going to develop a group of growing young churches based on this book. And Malk has already said to us, we would love you to be part of that cohort. We said, well, when's it happening? When's it starting? So that we can talk to the congregation about it. And that's going to happen after Easter. So it's sort of watch this space if we decide to go down this path. The next thing I wanted to say is that, and this is very interesting, Robin and I and others, Sunjay, have tried to find out, well, what other churches in the Uniting Church are actually where we are? They've actually read the book, they've actually done a study with Malk, they're actually thinking about taking on board those 6 areas. Well, we seem to be in the lead so far. We seem to be a bit further advanced than other churches that we know of. So that's fantastic. But it's also a bit scary, isn't it? Because if we decide to go down this path, there'll be other churches say, well, I wonder what they did at Baronia Park. Where did they start? What did they do? So there's a bit of pressure. But it's also really, really good pressure. So nobody said that there's pressure. I'm just sort of, just having an honest conversation with you. Okay. Now here, at Baronia Park, as I said earlier, we thought that we would not confine our thinking, if we go down this track, to 15 to 29-year-olds, because we've got so many other, young people of younger ages. So we're saying the whole range of young people, I think, would be right. And we don't have to stop at 29. We can go a little bit over that as well. But I think it's really about, our young people and their parents. And we are so blessed to have so many beautiful young people and their families and a very loving church family. So we're well on the road. And Robin's going to share with us now the findings from a survey which a number of us did last year. And
the survey was a very extensive survey which was sent out to people. It was an online survey too, so it was easy to do, and we asked everybody in the congregation to participate in it, and knowing that probably because it was an online, not everybody would, but we hoped that many would, and so we had 20 people who completed it. And the good part about that was that there was a breakup of ages. So we had people from as young as 14 right up to plus 70 who actually participated in that survey, and that was enabled us then to get enabled the Fuller Institute to get a good idea on the cross-section of the thinking of the people in the church here. The roles of the people in the church consisted, our minister, the church leaders, volunteers within the church, regular attendees, and occasional attendees as well. So that again, it was a good cross-section of the leadership and people who are attending the church. The questions were all based around against the 6 core commitments, and we actually rated they had it in colours in green, yellow and cerise, and we rated in the green area in every one of the questions, which means that we were in the high area, which was also very good for us to see. As you know, the things that Rosemary was talking about, in leadership, our score was 3.99, so that was high. Empathising with our young people was 4.01. Taking Jesus' message seriously was 4.14. And the one that we rated the highest was fuel a warm community. And our score was 4.48 out of 5. So I think we always said that we are a very loving and warm and open community. And that was certainly evidence in this survey. Prioritising young people everywhere, we scored 3.94. And being best neighbours, 3.83. So that we scored well, as you can say, and our strongest area was, of course, that area where we showed warmth to our people and also warmth outside of the church. And I think that is definitely what our church is and how we are perceived by the community as well. I think the community knows us as a very open church, and people feel very welcome when they come to our church here. So that the survey was really good to do, and it was very interesting to see the results. What might it look like that we need to do in our next step? You know, we've done the survey, we've talked about this. What else can we do? How can we connect more and engage more with our young people and maybe become more intergenerational? I think we are a very intergenerational church, and our young people and our older people and all ages interact and talk with each other, so that I think we are a church that does appreciate the young people, and I'm sure the young people, well, I hope the young people appreciate their older people too, and for their wisdom. There are some things that we could do to make it easier for everyone to really know who you are. As Rosemary said earlier on, do you know all the young, or talking to the adults, do you know all the young people's names? And to the young children, do you know all the adults' names? And we were thinking maybe a way is that we should get a lanyard and have everyone's just their first name on it, and give it to people as they come into the church and put it around their head. And even if we just did this for about a month, and everybody would look at you and say, you're Margaret or Michelle or Oscar, you know. Now I remember, and the more we say it, the more it'll stick in our head. So that's one idea we were thinking of. But what are some key issues that are important to our young people? We were also thinking that maybe one service, we should have a Q&A that should be led by our young people up here, and they could have a Q&A just like the Q&As that some of us will be watching on Channel 2 tomorrow night, where a lot of young people are participating in the last month or so. It's been wonderful to hear young people talking on that show. But we thought we could have a Q&A. You know, one of the youthful services could be a Q&A service where the young people could possibly even ask someone in the congregation about something that is very important to them, a subject that is very current and important to that young person, and get the opinions from people in the church. We thought that was one way of getting the young people, helping the young people to feel more part of the church service instead of just sitting in a seat. But there are lots of other key issues that older people are thinking about, so it could be a reverse one where we should have a Q&A of older people up here asking the young people questions. It's endless, isn't it? The way we can think of making a church service or part of a church service more relevant to all the ages that are part of our church. And then there's the mentoring and of the young ones, and the reverse mentoring, as I mentioned earlier, where the young ones can mentor us. And the reason I mentioned this is because I don't know about some of the older people, but I often have trouble with some of my digital devices. And who do I go to? I don't go to my husband, he doesn't know, he's as bad as me. I go to a young person who happens to be living in my house, which is very handy. You need young people around you all the time to help you with these things. So that's reverse mentoring, isn't it? They're helping us, but we can help them in so many other ways.
Thanks very much, Robin. And I should say that the reason that it's just that when we were planning this, we came up with a couple of those ideas that Robin mentioned. It wasn't that we weren't going to ask young people, because actually what we had planned last year was we wanted to talk with young people about growing young first. And then we thought about it and thought, but we really should talk to the whole congregation before we then go and talk with young people particularly. So don't feel that we're trying to come up with ideas for young people. Your voices will be heard. Okay, and you probably have better ideas than we do, so we're looking forward to hearing your ideas. Okay. Now, I think the next slide. Sunjay, would you like to move on to the next? Do you have a slide?
So, as a minister of this church, I had a great privilege to be part of this Growing Young 2020 sessions, 8 sessions with a beautiful 7 people, 6 from us and 1 from Paul's team. The MOC was the facilitator, and 8 of us had a wonderful 8 weeks journey together, forming a learning community. I love community, and I love making a community where people, can come and easily and safely sharing their understanding and knowledge in faith, and they're growing their life. So I had only 3 dot points for my reflection. The number 1 is I really enjoy to form or to be part of an intergeneration learning community. So one of the photos, Josh and Margaret Treble, they sat together on the same table, and then not like, Sunday after church, sharing morning tea, Margaret serving and Josh having pop-up and drinks from the kitchen. This table talk, they discuss each other. They discuss with the matters and points of what Growing Young book tells us. They discuss together. And also me and Ellen, Jenny, and also Rosemary, Robin, Mork, we all from different the generations and age group and gender, but we had a wonderful opportunity to learn from each other in this intergenerational learning community. And the next one is we had also an enculturated learning community. So 8 of us, we were learning from each other's learning. I learned a lot from my son Josh. We're sitting next to each other. So we have a son and father relationship, but in these sessions, like member and minister or members of the congregation. And also I learned a lot from Margaret and Rosemary and Robin and Morg as well. We were observing, and also we learning from observing and hearing what they said, what they share with each other. So I already got the knowledge and understanding, but affirming that this is true in others' life as well. It's a great opportunity, and the learning from other person's learning. And the last one is a transformative learning community. We, this 8 of us, have a level of education and qualification and leadership role in church and a wider church. But that means we have like a certain experiences and also understanding of what the church means and what the church youth ministry, what the church ministry looks like. But through this working in a transformative learning community, we also affirm that this is what I had, and this is what they have, and then also affirming what I have in my the ministry, and also opportunity to serve in this Christian church called Boronia Park. So these 3 dot points, intergenerational, enculturated, and a transformative learning community were a great opportunity for me to be part of this Growing Young 2020 session last year. So I will continue to bring this experience into my future ministry, and also my future opportunity being with young people and also the members of this congregation. So for me, I thank God for this great opportunity to be part of Growing Young Session 2020.
All right, now, Joshua and Isabella, had you had a chance, is there anything that you would like to add?
It was overall a good experience. We just contributed very little, but no. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, not that they didn't give us a chance. Like, we didn't say a lot. We just like to hear them talking, and it's new experience because like we were never in the
With us.
So
we weren't too scary.
yeah.
I guess we were just there to bring a younger perspective to the topics. And yeah, I guess we inputted when we could and when we felt that we had a different viewpoint on a certain area of
and like Mok being like in between, that's Mok there. So Mok being in the age group where he's between the older people and the younger people gives him like the chance to reflect for both age groups, and like the advantage of that being like when we give our opinion, he has something to say, like I agree or I don't, like, so that kind of helped a lot too.
A couple of the things just from my ideas. One was that the range of members was excellent, and it was a real privilege to have Josh and Isabella there. And also Sunjay was excellent in the fact that he didn't dominate or try to control or take over things. I became very frustrated at the dominance of data from America. The fact that all the churches they talked about had up to 8 or 10 paid ministry leaders. And I kept thinking that really didn't apply to us. The chairperson was fairly tolerant to allow me to do those things, and I'm coming up after 45 minutes, so I'll just go to the bottom lines. So I had initial impressions, and I had personal ideas and personal responses, but probably the program results that I thought were, we miss that sort of meeting, Jenny and I. We're accustomed to having that at our church, a regular Bible study group, and we missed that sort of thing. But the things that were important, we sort of knew these. We knew that community outreach is vital to the ongoing life of the church. We knew our youth are critically important to the overall growth, and we knew that ministry to youth and local communities should continue to be a high priority. We acknowledge, Jenny and I, that our current minister is working extremely hard to cater for all ages, from the littlies to the others. And during COVID, I think the leadership that we had here was absolutely outstanding, because we all got to continue worshipping, and we do give you credit in that time. Although worship at Ashburn House has ceased, there is still a huge amount of activity going on for young people: camps, groups, sleepovers, dinners, and also for the old people, the Sunjay and his little ducks that go travelling around. So you can't say that he only focuses on the young people, because the older people get taken out and taken on tours and things like that. The other thing that's impressed me, that lots of people here have an opportunity to get up at the front and speak and pray and give a children's talk or do a Bible reading, and I think that's growing the congregation, not just the young people but the congregation. And we do believe that the church should be given the opportunity to advertise for and employ an additional ministry agent to to assist with community outreach studies and teaching and leading programs in our school and church, because also we must remember that Sunjay also does scripture in schools as well. So we're pushing the limits of this man and his family very, very strongly to cater for the whole range of our community and our age and everything. And Jenny and I enjoyed it, although I had a fair few criticisms. I used to have to sit and I'd get digs in the ribs when I was about to say something, and I'd learn that that was not to be said. But, it was good, and we would like to meet again in some way, shape or form to look at the Bible things, to look at the Bible, not just the books.
Thanks very much, Alan, and Jenny. And for being honest, yeah. I mean, it can be frustrating in that the research is based in America, but the other thing is, as far as we know, there isn't any research yet in Australia. So where do we go? So we went to somewhere which is esteemed and I think very, very practical. I'm just going to run through this again. Okay, starting on this side, 6 key commitments. LEW. So this group's going to tell me about LE, so it's leadership and empathy, good. This middle group, W, warm, yes, okay. J, Jesus-centred, okay. P, prioritise, and N, neighbours, right. I think we're getting there. Good. Okay, right, yeah, okay. All right. Look, thank you very much for the comments, and it really was great to have that chance to study that book. Are there questions that other people would like to raise, either with me because I'm out the front? I was going to get Kevin to do this, but do you have any questions that you would like to ask? And it could be from anybody. You, Robin, because what I'll be asking you in a few minutes is your level of comfort for us to continue thinking, okay, we would like to become a growing young church over time. The question will be along these lines. Do you support the Boronia Park Church Council to continue working towards adopting a growing young approach in 2021 and beyond? So I'll just read that again. Do you, as our congregation, support your church council in continuing working towards adopting a growing young approach with the congregation in 2021? So that's what I'll be asking you. Okay. So do you have any? Do you have any questions?
When I was asked to join the group, I really felt quite inadequate, because not only was I the eldest by about 8 or 9 years or whatever. I felt that I didn't have the education background that everyone else had. So every now and again I would ask some what I thought were questions I needed to know, but I really felt that they felt a bit silly to others. But they were very kind. They'd answer my questions, and that was important. But I had noticed myself, since the years I've been here, that if we didn't have these young children now, it'd be very difficult. We're losing our older people. Every now and again there's another 1 or 2 go. So you know that your church is not going to be able to continue unless you have the people. And we've got a church, we've got schools all around us, yet we don't have any young people ever just come and say, I'd like to go to your church to see what's available. They don't talk about church. So I've realised it's a really important thing to do, so I was very happy to belong to it, and I really believe that we all, from what I've spoken to other people, I think we all are very happy to go ahead with this program, because I think that it gives us, and also because we're older, it doesn't mean to say we can't ask questions or we can't help in some way. If we've got aches and pains and we can't carry something, well, we can ask someone to help you. And so I think it's really important.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Margaret. I suppose Growing Young is not so much a prescribed program, but it's 6 key focus areas. So it gives us a sense of direction. Where should we be looking? Why should we be looking? I hope that you sort of got a bit of an understanding about that there's 6 really important things which will really help the treasures that we have here. They're God's treasures, our young people, to grow even more fully in their faith. And I suppose I won't go into something personal, I was just about to, but I won't. But I think that is really, really important. Anyway, so are there any... You're welcome to ask questions. Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so...
No,
just in here with a loud voice.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, if you attended that kind of a program, then are we gonna make another goal for someone on target, and then we doing approach to kind of we want a more upper level or something? So I mean, sorry for my.
No, that's fine. Do you want to learn more about it?
No, I mean you guys learn, or you guys the six point.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is circle. So
yes.
one, for example, Jesus message, right?
Yeah.
Then for example, then if we make a goal like okay, then now on Wednesday we're gonna have a Bible study for intergeneration, young to old, all come in, and then all kind of learning the Jesus message, kind of things, focus on it. Then later on, then what strategies can we put it in, and then make another next level to circle, another kind of do we have any goal to make it, or you can involve it, or because not many people involved it, but that sounds really good. And also need to encourage the young generation to have faith, so then need all together. So I want to know how next step, what is the next step that we can involve it. And
right. We haven't quite got there yet, but that's a really, really good question. Can I say that there's no none of those 6 there's no hierarchy. There's no saying this is the most important. They're all important together, and they all help each other. And the idea would be that we'd be moving forward on all of those, and but we'd have to, that's what, develop some sort of a strategic plan, I guess, to be honest, or that sounds a bit high level, but we haven't sort of quite got there. But what we want, I suppose, is to get a sense of whether you're happy, whether you think, okay, these 6 things, they look to be something that's important that we can use to help us support our young people and become an even more intergenerational church. Does that, so what we would do is say, okay, if we do decide that we're going to go forward, we say, okay, are there some people that would really like to look at this in more detail? And what are your ideas? We would like everybody to contribute, because then everybody owns the approach. It's not the church council, it's just we've started, but this is absolutely dependent on us as a congregation all being invested in this, in the sense that we all think it's a good idea, we all know what the 6 points are, we don't know all, huge amounts of detail, but we all think, yes, this is a good idea to move forward together. Robin, did you want to say anything, or that makes sense? Mm-hmm. So I think the next thing would be, after we've had the vote, not today, but a little bit of time, just say, okay, now you've had time to think about it, and I should say, thank you. I bought 2 copies of Growing Young yesterday, and Sunjay suggested we put these in the library. You're welcome to borrow those. I've put some sticky notes in there. You can write comments on the sticky notes on various pages, and maybe giving people have a chance to look at that, and you can have a look at these after this presentation. I'll take them over to the lunch, and you have a look, and if you'd like to borrow them, you're very welcome to. They're not expensive if you want to get your own copy from Coorong. There's 20% off at the moment, but they only cost $20 each. I mean, I think that's gold. So we've got those. And the other thing I was going to mention as well, I also, while I was over there, found 2 books which I absolutely wish I had years ago. One of them is called Sticky Faith, and I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's written by the same people that did Growing Young, and it's called Everyday Ideas to Build Lasting Faith in Your Kids, and that came out in 2011, so before they did the study. And then this one I could never have had years ago because it only came out in the last year or so. It's called Growing With, and Every Parent's Guide to Helping Teenagers and Young Adults Thrive in Their Faith, Family and Future. So there are resources which sort of surround the general sort of idea of 6 commitments to growing young.
Rosemary, can
Yeah.
I just say something?
Yes, of course.
I'd just like to mention that a playgroup that we've had going for a long time, and if it wasn't for our playgroup here that never really gets much of a mention, we wouldn't have these 2 families here.
Right. Okay, so that's another sort of avenue that we need to include in our thinking. Oh, that's a really important point. That's
We've never been able to get anyone else as a helper.
right.
I'm not involved now.
Right. Okay.
Margaret is wonderful.
Right. Okay, it sounds like there's a call out. I think Josh is coming along to help with playgroup, but if you are enthusiastic or keen or have time, that might be something that you want to think about, pray about, and become involved in playgroup. Because, as I said, we're going to be, if we do go ahead, we're going to be different from saying 15 to 29. We're going to start much younger. So we can start with playgroup. The other thing I'm just going to briefly mention is that I've mentioned the extra books. There's also a website you can go on. Oh, I haven't got my glasses. There's also a monthly Pulse newsletter online that you can sign up for, and I did that the other day. So I haven't received anything yet, but I wouldn't expect to. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting sort of to bring it to this question. So I'm going to ask you now, you can. I want to say, if you don't feel ready and you say, I don't want to go down here yet, or whatever, that's fine, or you want to abstain. But I'm just going to, I need to put the question, which is, do you, as our congregation, and everyone can vote, I think that's okay, isn't it, Robin, everybody? And we're just going to get a show of hands. And Robin, maybe if you could do, if we need to, somebody to count, that would be good. Do we, as a congregation at Boronia Park Uniting Church, support the Church Council and our congregation to continue working towards adopting a growing young approach in 2021 and beyond? That's the question. Okay, so hands up if you're happy to do that. Little ones can vote too. Okay, all right, okay. Thank you. Hands down. Those who are not yet comfortable. Right, I don't think we've got anybody who doesn't feel a level of comfort. I'm sorry if you feel that's a bit discomfort. Anyone who would like to say, I abstained? Right. Well, that's absolutely wonderful. I think we've got everybody in agreement that this would be a good direction to follow. Can I thank you for your time and your patience and listening and being very good at remembering those 6 the key areas. We will get back to you and have a think about whether you'd like to be involved in doing some more work around this topic, whether you would like to borrow a book, whether you'd like to buy a book. I'm not encouraging, you don't have to buy a book, but there's that opportunity if you would like. And I think, if you don't mind, we might just close in a few moments of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you that we can gather together and find out about the work that's been done by the Fuller Youth Institute. We thank you for all the work that they have done. We thank you for those directions, those commitments that we think we can help to further strengthen the wonderful, loving congregation and young people that we have here. We ask that you continue to bless us, that you be with us on this journey, that that down the track we find the right person to become our family and youth, family and community worker to work with us to further strengthen this. Be with each and every one of our beautiful young people, their families, all of our people in our intergenerational church. And we are just so blessed to be able to be together and to be one of your families. In Jesus' name we pray with tremendous thanksgiving and with joy. Amen.